I'm General Sarah Mitchell, 42, standing in my civilian clothes at my sister's military promotion ceremony, watching my family celebrate her achievement while having no idea that the college dropout they'd dismissed for 20 years is now one of the youngest female generals in U.S. military history. Tonight, when my sister's commanding officer recognizes me and snaps to attention, everything my family believes about success and failure is about to shatter. Before I tell you how a single moment of recognition changed everything, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because this story proves that sometimes the biggest failures become the greatest leaders. My mother once told me not everyone is meant to be exceptional, sweetheart. And that's okay, someone has to support the stars. She said it gently over coffee, like she was doing me a kindness. I was 19, freshly commissioned, my uniform still stiff with pride. She didn't mean to hurt me, at least I don't think she did, but that sentence split me in half. It became the quiet soundtrack of my life. Every holiday, every visit home, I heard it echo and how they doted on my sister, the real success story. They never outright said I was a failure, but silence is louder than words. When my sister got promoted, they posted about it like it was the second coming. When I returned from deployment, they didn't even meet me at the airport. "You're always so busy," my dad said, as if I'd missed a dentist appointment, not spent 7 months running black ops across borders no one dares name. At Thanksgiving, my own seat was handed to a neighbor's son because he just got accepted to law school, and that's a big deal. I ate standing up by the sink, my medals still packed in a box in the garage. That night I told myself I was done, I wouldn't chase their approval anymore. I had survived enemy fire, I didn't need to survive my own family's indifference. Then last month, I sat in the back of a command briefing, there to observe, nothing more. The room buzzed with names and ranks, titles that never seemed to fit right on me until the door opened. A commander walked in, eyes scanning, and stopped right on me. He squared his shoulders, stood straighter, and said, "Ma'am, you're the general?" And suddenly the room fell silent. Not for her, not for my sister, for me. That moment wasn't sweet, it was sharp. It was years of being unseen cracking open in a single breath. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't embarrassed to take up space. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I've led men into fire, held the hands of soldiers dying in sand, and made decisions that still keep me awake. But the hardest thing I've ever done was survive being invisible in my own home. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Please just drop a listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. It means more than you think. Sometimes knowing someone is out there makes it easier to tell the truth out loud. And if my story reaches you, if it makes you feel less alone, please consider subscribing. It helps this truth go further. Thank you, and now let me tell you everything. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant living under the weight of impossible expectations wrapped in the American flag. We were third-generation military, with service records that read like a history of American conflicts. My grandfather, Colonel James Mitchell, had led a battalion through the Battle of the Bulge. My father, Colonel Robert Mitchell, had commanded a regiment during the Gulf War. Military service wasn't just expected in our family, it was predestined, coded into our DNA like eye color or height. But there was a hierarchy even within that tradition. My younger sister Emma was born to be the golden child, the one who would carry the family legacy forward with grace and distinction. From the moment she could walk, she moved with the kind of natural confidence that made adults pause and take notice. She was the child who organized neighborhood kids into precision drill formations, who memorized military history like other kids memorized cartoon characters, who could disassemble and reassemble a rifle before she was old enough to drive. I was different. Where Emma was naturally charismatic, I was quietly intense. Where she commanded attention effortlessly, I preferred to observe from the corners. Where she seemed born to lead from the front, I was always thinking 3 moves ahead, analyzing systems and strategies that others couldn't see. But in a family that valued visible leadership and obvious achievement, quiet intelligence was easily overlooked. The differences became stark during our teenage years. Emma was student body president, captain of the debate team, and valedictorian of her graduating class. She received appointments to 3 different service academies and chose West Point because it was the most prestigious. My parents held a celebration dinner when her acceptance letter arrived, inviting extended family and neighbors to share in their pride. I was academically excellent but socially awkward, more interested in computer programming and strategic analysis than in popularity contests or public speaking. When I received my own appointment to West Point a year later, the response was notably more subdued. "That's wonderful, dear," my mother said, immediately adding, "Emma can help you navigate the social aspects. It's going to be so different from high school." The assumption was that I would struggle where Emma would excel, that I would need guidance and support to achieve what she would accomplish naturally. It was the first of many times my family would underestimate me, but it wouldn't be the last. West Point was brutal in ways the movies never capture. It wasn't just the physical demands or the academic rigor. It was the constant pressure to prove yourself worthy of wearing the uniform, to demonstrate that you belonged among the future leaders of the American military. For some cadets, like Emma, this came naturally. She thrived in the highly structured environment, excelling in leadership positions and earning the respect of both her peers and her superiors. I struggled initially, not with the coursework or the physical training, but with the social dynamics and the emphasis on visible leadership. I was better suited to analyzing complex problems and developing innovative solutions than to commanding attention in a room full of alpha personalities. My natural inclination was to lead from behind, to be the strategist rather than the figurehead. It took 2 years for me to find my niche. The breakthrough came during a complex military exercise in my junior year, when our battalion was tasked with planning and executing a multi-phase operation against a simulated enemy force. While other cadets focused on traditional tactics and straightforward approaches, I developed an unconventional strategy that relied on deception, misdirection, and careful coordination between multiple units operating independently. The exercise was a complete success, with our forces achieving their objectives while sustaining minimal casualties. More importantly, the tactical approach I had developed became a case study used in future training exercises. For the first time, I had proven that my different way of thinking wasn't a weakness, it was a strategic advantage. My tactical instructor, Colonel Martinez, called me into his office after reviewing the exercise results. "Cadet Mitchell," he said, "you have an unusual mind for warfare. Most officers think in terms of overwhelming force or superior firepower. You think in terms of systems and leverage points. That's a rare gift, and it's exactly what the military needs in the 21st century." But even this recognition came with a caveat. "The challenge," he continued, "is that this kind of strategic thinking often goes unrecognized in a system that rewards visible leadership and obvious heroism. You'll need to find ways to make your contributions more apparent, or you risk being overlooked throughout your career." It was prescient advice that I would remember for years to come. Emma graduated first in her class and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry, a combat arms branch that had only recently been open to women. The ceremony was everything a military family dreams of: dress uniforms, proud salutes, and photographs that would grace our parents' walls for decades. Mom cried during Emma's oath of office. Dad stood at attention during the entire ceremony. Extended family members traveled from across the country to witness her commissioning. I graduated 6th in my class and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in military intelligence, a branch that my family understood in theory but couldn't really appreciate in practice. The ceremony was identical to Emma's, but the family response was notably more subdued. There were congratulations and photographs, but not the same sense of celebration and pride that had marked Emma's achievement. "Military intelligence," my uncle said at the reception afterward, "that's like being a librarian in uniform, right? You analyze reports and write briefings?" The comment stung because it revealed how little my family understood about what I would actually be doing. Military intelligence officers don't just analyze reports, they develop the information that shapes strategic decisions, coordinate with foreign intelligence services, and often work in dangerous, classified environments that most people never hear about. But trying to explain the importance and complexity of intelligence work to family members who valued infantry officers and combat commands felt like defending why mathematics mattered to people who only respected physical strength. It was easier to let them maintain their misconceptions than to fight for understanding that might never come. My first assignment was to Fort Bragg, where I worked in strategic intelligence analysis for the 18th Airborne Corps. The work was exactly what I had hoped for: complex, challenging, and critically important to national security. I spent my days analyzing threat assessments, developing intelligence products for senior commanders, and coordinating with analysts from other agencies and allied nations. Emma was assigned to Fort Campbell, where she served as a platoon leader in the 101st Airborne Division. Her work was more visible and easier for our family to understand, leading soldiers in training exercises, maintaining equipment readiness, and preparing for potential combat deployments. When she called home, she had clear, concrete stories to share about her soldiers' achievements and her unit's accomplishments. When I called home, my work was largely classified and difficult to explain in terms that civilians could appreciate. "How was your week, sweetheart?" Mom would ask, and I'd respond with something vague about analysis projects and coordination meetings. The gap between what I was actually doing and what I could share with my family created a distance that grew wider with each conversation. The real divergence in our careers began during our first deployments. Emma deployed to Afghanistan with her infantry unit, where she led combat patrols and participated in operations that would later earn her a Bronze Star and widespread recognition within the military. Her deployment stories were the kind that made headlines. Leading her soldiers through firefights, coordinating medical evacuations under enemy fire, and demonstrating the kind of courage under pressure that military families understand and celebrate. My first deployment was to a location I still can't name, working on operations I still can't discuss, achieving objectives that will never be publicly acknowledged. I spent 14 months developing intelligence networks, coordinating with foreign operatives, and providing critical information that shaped strategic decisions at the highest levels of government. The work was dangerous, complex, and vitally important to national security, but none of it could be shared with anyone outside the intelligence community. When we both returned from our deployments, the family response was predictably different. Emma was greeted with a celebration dinner, detailed questions about her experiences, and obvious pride in her visible achievements. I was welcomed home with polite interest and vague questions about whether I had enjoyed my overseas assignment. The pattern continued for years. Emma's career progressed through increasingly visible and prestigious assignments, company command, staff positions at brigade and division levels, advanced military education at the Command and General Staff College. Her achievements were documented in efficiency reports, award citations, and photographs that my parents proudly displayed and shared with anyone who would listen. My career progressed through increasingly classified and sensitive assignments, counterintelligence operations, strategic planning for special operations forces, liaison positions with foreign intelligence services. My achievements were documented in classified evaluations that my family would never see, in operations summaries that would remain secret for decades, in thank you letters from senior officials whose names I couldn't mention to anyone. By our 10th year of service, the gap between perception and reality had become a chasm. Emma was a major commanding a company in an elite airborne unit, with a reputation as a rising star who would likely achieve senior leadership positions. I was also a major, but my work in strategic intelligence and special operations had kept me largely invisible to everyone outside the classified world. At family gatherings, Emma's career was the subject of detailed conversations and obvious pride. Relatives would ask about her unit, her soldiers, her deployment experiences, and her future assignments. My career was acknowledged with polite questions that were quickly redirected to other topics when my answers remained necessarily vague. "Sarah's doing well too," my mother would say when relatives asked about me. "She's working in intelligence analysis. Very cerebral work." The tone always suggested that cerebral work was somehow less valuable than the real soldiering that Emma was doing. The assumption that I was doing desk work while Emma was doing real military service became so entrenched that I stopped trying to correct it. It was easier to let my family believe I was a glorified analyst than to constantly defend the importance of work I couldn't discuss. The promotion to lieutenant colonel brought another moment of stark contrast. Emma's promotion was accompanied by a ceremony at Fort Campbell, with our parents in attendance and photographs posted on social media. My promotion was acknowledged in a brief, classified ceremony at a location my family couldn't visit, with no photographs and no public recognition. "Congratulations on your promotion, dear," my mother said when I called to share the news. "Lieutenant Colonel sounds very impressive. Are you still doing analysis work?" "Something like that, Mom." "Well, that's wonderful." Emma's promotion ceremony was beautiful. You should have seen how proud we were. "Maybe you can have a celebration dinner when you get back to the States." The casual dismissal of my achievement, the assumption that my promotion was somehow less significant than Emma's, the suggestion that my career was a distant second to hers, it all crystallized in that moment. I had spent 15 years serving my country in ways that required sacrifices my family couldn't imagine, achieving success in areas they couldn't understand, and they still saw me as the sister who was trying to keep up with Emma's obvious excellence. That night, I made a decision that would define the rest of my military career. I would stop seeking validation from people who couldn't see my worth. I would stop trying to bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I actually was. I would find my satisfaction in the work itself, in the recognition of my peers and superiors who understood what I was accomplishing, and in the knowledge that my service was making a difference even if it remained invisible to my family. The promotion to colonel came during my 18th year of service, when I was selected to command a joint intelligence task force responsible for counterterrorism operations across 3 geographic regions. The position required coordinating with multiple agencies, managing classified operations in hostile environments, and briefing senior officials up to and including the National Security Council. It was the kind of assignment that represented the pinnacle of success in the intelligence field, but explaining its significance to my family was impossible. How do you describe commanding a multinational task force when you can't name the countries involved? How do you explain the importance of operations that will never be publicly acknowledged? How do you share pride in achievements that must remain secret? Emma, meanwhile, had been promoted to colonel and was commanding a brigade at Fort Hood, leading 3,000 soldiers in training exercises and deployment preparations. Her achievements were visible, measurable, and easily understood by anyone with basic knowledge of military structure. Her promotion ceremony was featured in the local newspaper, and her parents' pride was evident to everyone who knew them. My promotion was acknowledged in a classified ceremony attended only by intelligence community personnel. There were no newspapers, no public recognition, no photographs that could be shared with family. When I called home to share the news, the response was predictably tepid. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my father said. "Colonel Mitchell, that has a nice ring to it. Are you still working in analysis?" "Something like that, Dad." "Well, we're proud of you. Emma just got her brigade command, you know. 3,000 soldiers under her command. We're driving down to Texas next month for her change of command ceremony." The contrast was always there, unspoken but obvious. Emma's achievements were celebrated, discussed, and proudly shared with anyone who would listen. My achievements were acknowledged with polite interest and quickly forgotten. But the most significant moment of my career was still ahead. During my 19th year of service, I was selected for promotion to brigadier general, a rank achieved by less than 1% of military officers, and by an even smaller percentage of women. The promotion represented not just personal achievement, but recognition that I had reached the highest levels of strategic leadership in the American military. The selection process for general officer ranks is exhaustive and highly competitive. Candidates are evaluated by multiple boards, undergo extensive background investigations, and are ultimately selected by the President of the United States. Being chosen for promotion to general officer is an honor that represents the trust of the entire military establishment and the American people. But even this extraordinary achievement came with the same constraints that had defined my entire career. The promotion ceremony was classified, the position I would be assuming was classified, and the operations I would be responsible for were classified. My family would know I had been promoted, but they would never understand the full significance of what I had achieved. Emma, now a colonel with nearly 20 years of service, was following a traditional path toward potential general officer rank herself, but through the conventional infantry and command track that the military establishment understood and valued. Her progression was visible, measurable, and likely to culminate in senior leadership positions that would bring public recognition and obvious prestige. My progression had been through the shadow world of intelligence and special operations, achieving success that was known only to a small community of professionals who operated outside public view. I had reached the same level of achievement as Emma, but through a path that remained invisible to everyone outside the classified world. The irony was not lost on me. I had spent 20 years proving myself in the most demanding and dangerous aspects of military service, achieving recognition at the highest levels of national security leadership, and my own family still saw me as the sister who was trying to keep up with Emma's obvious success. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in my apartment near the Pentagon, reviewing briefing materials for a National Security Council meeting, when my phone rang. It was my mother, calling with news about Emma's latest assignment. "Sarah, I have wonderful news," she began, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Emma has been selected for promotion to Brigadier General. Can you believe it? Our little Emma is going to be a general." I set down my briefing folder and closed my eyes. "That's wonderful, Mom. I'm very proud of her. The ceremony is going to be at the Pentagon next month. The whole family is coming, your father and I, Uncle Jim and Aunt Mary, even your cousins from California. It's going to be such a special day. I'm sure it will be. You'll be there, of course. I know you're always busy with your analysis work, but this is important. Emma specifically asked me to make sure you'd be able to attend." I thought about the briefings I would need to reschedule, the classified meetings that would have to be moved, the security protocols that would need to be navigated to allow my attendance at a Pentagon ceremony. "I'll be there, Mom." "Wonderful. Oh, Sarah, I'm just so proud. A general. Can you imagine? Our Emma is going to be a general in the United States Army." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C., thinking about the strange trajectories our careers had taken. Emma had followed the traditional path. Infantry officer, company command, staff positions, brigade command, and now selection for general officer rank. It was a progression that made sense to anyone familiar with military structure, a success story that could be easily understood and celebrated. I had achieved the same rank through a completely different path: intelligence operations, classified assignments, strategic planning for special operations, and selection for general officer rank in the intelligence field. But my achievement would remain largely invisible, known only to the small community of professionals who operated in the classified world. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for the same week as a major Pentagon briefing I was scheduled to give to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about emerging threats in the Pacific region. I would attend Emma's ceremony in civilian clothes, blending into the background as the family member who worked in analysis, while she took center stage as the newly promoted general. It was a familiar dynamic, but one that had lost its sting over the years. I had found my satisfaction in the work itself, in the recognition of my peers and superiors who understood what I was accomplishing, and in the knowledge that my service was making a difference even if it remained invisible to my family. The evening before Emma's promotion ceremony, I attended a classified briefing about intelligence operations in Southeast Asia. The meeting was held in a secure conference room in the Pentagon, with senior officials from multiple agencies discussing operations that would shape American foreign policy for the next decade. As the briefing concluded, General Patricia Hayes, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, approached me in the hallway. "Sarah, I wanted to congratulate you again on your selection for promotion. The intelligence community is lucky to have you at the general officer level." "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the confidence you've shown in me. You've earned it. Your work on the counterterrorism task force has been exceptional, and your strategic analysis has been invaluable to senior leadership. You represent the best of what our intelligence professionals can achieve." As I walked through the Pentagon corridors that evening, I reflected on the strange duality of my professional life. In this building, among these people, I was General Sarah Mitchell, a respected leader whose opinions were sought by the highest levels of American government. Tomorrow, at Emma's ceremony, I would be Sarah, the older sister who worked in analysis and was trying to keep up with Emma's obvious success. The promotion ceremony was held in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, a room lined with portraits of Medal of Honor recipients and steeped in military tradition. Emma looked radiant in her dress uniform, standing at attention as the oath of office was administered by a three-star general who praised her exceptional service and her potential for continued leadership. My family filled the front rows, beaming with pride as Emma was promoted to the rank of brigadier general. Mom cried during the oath administration. Dad stood at attention during the entire ceremony. Relatives took photographs and whispered among themselves about how proud they were of our family's continued tradition of military service. I sat in the back row in a simple blue dress, watching my sister achieve the same rank I had earned 6 months earlier through a completely different path. There was no bitterness in my observation, just a quiet appreciation for the irony of the situation. Two sisters, both achieving the rank of general officer, but only one receiving recognition and celebration for the achievement. After the ceremony, there was a reception in an adjacent conference room where family members and colleagues could congratulate the newly promoted general. Emma was surrounded by well-wishers, basking in the attention and recognition that came with visible achievement. I stood near the back of the room, making small talk with relatives who asked polite questions about my work and quickly moved on to more interesting topics. It was a familiar dynamic, one that I had learned to navigate without taking personally. That's when everything changed. A colonel I didn't recognize approached the reception area, looking around as if searching for someone specific. He was tall, gray-haired, and moved with the bearing of a senior officer who had spent decades in positions of authority. His uniform indicated he was assigned to the Pentagon, but I couldn't identify his specific role or department. As he scanned the room, his eyes fell on me, and his expression changed completely. He stopped mid-stride, straightened his posture, and began walking directly toward me with obvious purpose. "Excuse me," he said when he reached my position, "are you General Sarah Mitchell?" The question was asked loudly enough that several nearby conversations stopped. Family members who had been politely ignoring me suddenly turned to listen. Emma, who had been holding court across the room, looked over with obvious confusion. "Yes," I replied simply. The colonel immediately came to attention and rendered a sharp salute. "Ma'am, I'm Colonel James Wright, Emma's commanding officer. It's an honor to meet you, General. Your reputation in the intelligence community is extraordinary." The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the colonel who was saluting the woman they thought worked in analysis. "I had no idea Emma's sister was General Mitchell," he continued, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Your work on counterterrorism operations has been legendary within the special operations community. The task force you commanded saved countless lives and disrupted terrorist networks across 3 continents." Emma stepped forward, her face a mixture of confusion and shock. "I'm sorry, Colonel Wright, but there seems to be some mistake. My sister Sarah works in intelligence analysis. She's not a general." Colonel Wright turned to look at Emma with obvious surprise. "Ma'am, with respect, your sister is Brigadier General Sarah Mitchell, one of the most highly regarded intelligence officers in the U.S. military. She was promoted to general officer rank 6 months ago, and she currently commands the Joint Counterterrorism Intelligence Task Force." The silence that followed was absolute. My parents stood frozen, staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Emma's mouth was slightly open, her eyes moving between Colonel Wright and me as if trying to process information that didn't match her understanding of reality. "That's impossible," my mother said quietly. "Sarah does analysis work. She's never mentioned being a general." Colonel Wright looked around the room with growing understanding of the family dynamics he had inadvertently exposed. "Ma'am, General Mitchell's work is highly classified. Most of her achievements can't be publicly discussed. But within the intelligence community, she's regarded as one of the finest strategic minds of her generation. Uncle Jim stepped forward, looking confused. Are you saying that Sarah outranks Emma? Sir, they hold the same rank, Colonel Wright replied. Both are brigadier generals. But General Sarah Mitchell has been in that rank longer, and her operational responsibilities are quite extensive. Emma finally found her voice. Sarah, is this true? Are you really a general? I looked around the room at my family members, all staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that might have been awe. After 20 years of being dismissed and overlooked, after decades of having my achievements minimized and my career misunderstood, the truth was finally in the open. Yes, I said simply. I am. The aftermath of that revelation was unlike anything I could have anticipated. The reception continued, but the energy had completely shifted. Family members who had barely acknowledged my presence were suddenly approaching me with questions, congratulations, and obvious confusion about how they had so completely misunderstood my career. Colonel Wright, realizing he had created an unexpected family situation, tried to excuse himself, but Emma asked him to stay and explain more about my work and reputation within the military community. Your sister, he told the assembled family, is one of the most respected intelligence officers in the U.S. military. She's briefed the president, coordinated operations with allied nations, and led task forces that have prevented terrorist attacks on American soil. Her work is classified, so most of it can't be discussed publicly, but within our community, she's a legend. My father, who had spent 20 years treating my career as a subordinate concern to Emma's obvious success, sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Sarah, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you explain what you were really doing? I tried, Dad. Every time I attempted to share anything about my work, you either didn't understand or changed the subject. It was easier to let you think I was doing analysis than to keep fighting for recognition that never came. Mom approached me with tears in her eyes. Sweetheart, we had no idea. We thought you were struggling to keep up with Emma's success. I wasn't struggling, Mom. I was succeeding in ways you couldn't see because my work happens in classified spaces that you can't access. Emma stood quiet through most of these exchanges, processing the realization that her older sister, the one the family had always seen as less successful, had actually achieved everything she had achieved and more, but without any recognition or celebration from the people who mattered most to her. Finally, she approached me with an expression I had never seen from her before, genuine humility mixed with obvious remorse. Sarah, I need to apologize. I've spent our entire careers thinking I was the successful sister, the one carrying the family tradition, the one making our parents proud. I had no idea you were doing work that was more important and more dangerous than anything I've ever done. Emma, we both serve. We both contribute. The work is different, but the commitment is the same. No, it's not the same, she replied. I've been getting recognition, promotion ceremonies, family celebrations, and public acknowledgement for my service. You've been doing work that's arguably more important to national security, and you've been doing it without any of that recognition or support. Colonel Wright, who had been listening to this family conversation with obvious discomfort, finally spoke up. If I may, General Mitchell, your sister's work has been exceptional as well. She's one of the finest infantry officers I've ever served with, and her promotion to general officer rank is well deserved. I know, I replied. I've been proud of Emma's achievements even when she didn't know about mine. The reception continued for another hour, but the conversations were completely different from what anyone had expected. Instead of celebrating Emma's promotion as the family's first general officer, we were processing the revelation that we actually had two general officers in the family, and that the one who had been dismissed for 20 years was actually the one with the more senior and sensitive position. As the evening wound down, my parents approached me together, wearing expressions of obvious regret and confusion. Sarah, my father said, we owe you an enormous apology. We've spent 20 years not understanding or appreciating what you were accomplishing. We treated your career as less important than Emma's, and we were completely wrong. You didn't have the information you needed to understand, Dad. My work is classified. I couldn't share the details that would have made the significance clear. But we should have trusted you, my mother added. We should have asked better questions. We should have recognized that your unwillingness to share details might mean your work was more important, not less important. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange turn my life had taken. For 20 years, I had found satisfaction in work that remained invisible to my family, achieving success that couldn't be shared with the people whose opinions had once mattered most to me. I had learned to find validation in the recognition of my peers and superiors, in the knowledge that my service was making a difference, and in the personal satisfaction of work done well. The revelation of my true rank and responsibilities had changed the family dynamic instantly, but it hadn't changed the fundamental reality of my career. I would continue to work in classified spaces, achieving objectives that couldn't be publicly acknowledged, serving my country in ways that would remain largely invisible to the world outside the intelligence community. The difference was that my family finally understood, or at least was beginning to understand, that invisible work could be just as important and valuable as the visible achievements they had always celebrated. 3 weeks after Emma's promotion ceremony, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. Sarah, I've been reading everything I can find about intelligence operations and the role of the intelligence community in national security. I want to understand what you do, even if I can't know the specific details. Mom, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I owe you 20 years of attention and respect. I want to start making up for that now. The conversations that followed were unlike any we had ever had. Mom asked thoughtful questions about intelligence work in general, about the challenges of leading in classified environments, about the personal costs of a career that required constant secrecy. She couldn't know the specifics of my work, but she was finally trying to understand the context and significance of what I was doing. Dad started introducing me differently at family gatherings. Instead of "This is Sarah, she works in intelligence analysis," it became "This is my daughter Sarah, she's a general in the U.S. Army and one of our country's top intelligence officers." The change in language was small, but the change in attitude was enormous. Emma and I developed a new relationship built on mutual respect rather than the unspoken competition that had defined our interactions for decades. She started asking for my perspective on strategic issues, recognizing that my experience in joint operations and interagency coordination provided insights that her traditional infantry background couldn't match. 6 months later, I was promoted to Major General, becoming one of the youngest officers ever to achieve that rank in the intelligence field. The promotion ceremony was still classified, still held in a secure location that my family couldn't visit, but this time the response was completely different. "Congratulations, sweetheart," my mother said when I called to share the news. "Major General, I've been reading about military ranks, and I know how extraordinary that achievement is. We're so proud of you." "Thank you, Mom. I wish we could attend your ceremony, but I understand why that's not possible. Maybe we could have a family dinner to celebrate when you get back to the DC area." It was the first time my family had ever suggested celebrating one of my promotions, and the gesture meant more than they could know. A year later, Emma was promoted to Major General as well, achieving the same rank through her traditional infantry and command track. This time, both of our careers were celebrated equally, with recognition that we had both reached extraordinary levels of success through different but equally valuable paths. The promotion ceremony for Emma was held at the Pentagon, and this time I attended in my dress uniform, wearing the insignia of my rank openly for the first time at a family event. When Colonel Wright, now also promoted, saw me in uniform, he commented that it was the first time he had seen both Mitchell sisters in the same room wearing general officer rank. "Your family," he told my parents, "has contributed 2 of the finest general officers in the U.S. military. Different specialties, different paths, but both representing the very best of American military leadership." After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs, I finally stood beside Emma as an equal, both of us wearing the same rank, both of us recognized for our achievements. The photographer suggested various poses, but the one that meant the most to me was simple: two sisters, two generals, representing different aspects of military service but united in their commitment to serving their country. Later that evening, at the family dinner celebrating Emma's promotion, Uncle Jim raised a toast that captured how much our family dynamic had changed. To Sarah and Emma, he said, two remarkable women who have shown us that success in military service can take many forms. To Emma, for her visible leadership and her willingness to lead from the front. And to Sarah, for her invisible sacrifices and her willingness to serve in the shadows. We're proud of both of you, and we're grateful for everything you've done to keep our country safe. As I looked around the table at my family members, people who had dismissed my achievements for 20 years but who now understood and appreciated what I had accomplished, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with rank or recognition. The validation I had once craved from them was no longer necessary, but having it felt like a gift I hadn't expected to receive. 2 years later, I was selected for promotion to Lieutenant General, a rank held by fewer than 200 officers in the entire U.S. military. The position came with responsibility for intelligence operations across multiple geographic regions and direct access to the highest levels of national security decision-making. Emma, meanwhile, had been selected to command a division, leading 15,000 soldiers in one of the Army's most prestigious assignments. Both of our careers had reached levels that our grandfather and father could never have imagined, but through paths they never could have predicted. The family gathering that year included a surprise that none of us had anticipated. My grandfather, Colonel James Mitchell, now in his 90s but still sharp and proud, had followed our careers with growing understanding of how military service had evolved since his time. When I was a young officer, he told us over dinner, military leadership meant leading soldiers into battle, commanding from the front, showing physical courage under fire. I thought that was the only way to serve with honor. He paused, looking at both Emma and me with obvious pride. I've learned that modern military service requires different kinds of courage and different kinds of leadership. Emma represents the traditional values I understood, leading soldiers, commanding in the field, visible heroism that inspires others. Sarah represents something I'm still learning to understand, strategic thinking, classified operations, invisible sacrifices that protect the nation in ways most people never know about. He raised his glass with a slightly shaking hand. Both of you have exceeded anything our family has ever achieved in military service. Both of you have proven that women can serve at the highest levels of military leadership. And both of you have shown me that there are many ways to serve with honor and distinction. The conversation that followed was one of the most meaningful of my life. For the first time, I was able to share some of the broader strategic challenges facing the military and the intelligence community, speaking as a senior leader rather than as the family member who worked in analysis. Emma shared her experiences commanding large units and preparing soldiers for combat, speaking with the authority of someone who had proven herself at every level of traditional military leadership. But the moment that meant the most came when my grandfather asked to speak with me privately after dinner. "Sarah," he said when we were alone, "I owe you an apology that's 20 years overdue." "Grandpa, you don't." "Yes, I do. I've spent your entire career not understanding what you were doing or why it mattered. I valued the kind of military service I understood and dismissed the kind I couldn't see. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "This belonged to my father, your great-grandfather. It's the Distinguished Service Cross he earned in France during World War I. It's been in our family for over a century, passed down to the officer in each generation who best represents the values of military service." He handed me the box with obvious emotion. I always assumed it would go to Emma because she followed the traditional path of infantry leadership. But I've come to understand that you've served with equal distinction in ways that required different but equally important sacrifices. You've earned this, and I want you to have it. Inside the box was a medal I had only seen in photographs, the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor in recognition of extraordinary heroism. It had been awarded to my great-grandfather for actions during the Meuse-Argonne offensive in 1918, when he led a company-sized unit through enemy lines to establish a critical observation post. "Grandpa, this should go to Emma. She's the one who followed the traditional infantry path." No, Sarah. This medal represents extraordinary service in the face of enemy action. Your great-grandfather earned it by risking his life to gather intelligence that saved thousands of other soldiers. You've spent your career doing the same thing, risking yourself to gather intelligence that protects others. The circumstances are different, but the service is the same. Holding that medal, feeling the weight of 4 generations of military service, I understood something that had taken decades to become clear. Military service isn't about following a prescribed path or achieving visible recognition. It's about finding the way you can best serve your country and then pursuing that path with everything you have, regardless of whether others understand or appreciate what you're doing. The promotion to lieutenant general was the capstone of a career that had exceeded every expectation I had held when I first walked into West Point as an 18-year-old cadet. The ceremony was still classified, still held in a secure location, but this time my family understood why they couldn't attend and what it meant that I had achieved this level of responsibility. My new position required moving to a location I still can't name, taking responsibility for intelligence operations that I still can't discuss, working with foreign partners whose identities remain classified. But for the first time in my career, my family understood the significance of what I was doing, even if they couldn't know the specifics. The farewell dinner they organized before my departure was everything I had wanted from them for 20 years: recognition, understanding, and pride in what I had accomplished. Emma spoke about how much she had learned from watching me build a successful military career through determination and excellence rather than through visibility and recognition. My parents apologized again for the years they had spent not understanding or appreciating my service. My extended family asked thoughtful questions about intelligence work in general and expressed genuine pride in having a lieutenant general in the family. But the moment that captured everything came when my 8-year-old niece, Emma's daughter, asked me what a general does. "Well, sweetheart," I said, "different generals do different things. Your mom leads soldiers and makes sure they're trained and ready to protect our country. I work with information and make sure the people who make important decisions have everything they need to keep America safe." "So you're both heroes?" she asked. "We both serve," I replied. Being a hero isn't about wearing a uniform or having a rank. It's about finding a way to help people and then doing that work every day, even when it's difficult and even when no one notices. As I prepared to leave for my new assignment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The 18-year-old who had chosen West Point despite family doubts had become a lieutenant general responsible for operations that would shape American foreign policy. The young officer who had struggled with the social dynamics of military leadership had developed into a strategic thinker whose advice was sought by the highest levels of government. Most importantly, the daughter who had once felt invisible in her own family had learned that true validation comes from within, from the knowledge that you're doing work that matters, regardless of whether others can see or appreciate it. 5 years later, I was nominated for promotion to general, 4-star rank, becoming one of only a handful of women in American history to achieve that level of military leadership. The nomination required Senate confirmation, which meant my career would finally become public knowledge in ways that had never been possible before. The confirmation hearings were covered by national media, with articles describing my career path from West Point cadet to 4-star general, my role in developing counterterrorism strategy, and my leadership of joint intelligence operations across multiple continents. For the first time, my family could read public accounts of my achievements and understand the full scope of what I had accomplished. Emma, now a lieutenant general herself and commanding a corps of 45,000 soldiers, testified at my confirmation hearing about my leadership and character. Her testimony was carried live on C-SPAN and later excerpted in news articles about my nomination. Sarah Mitchell, she told the Senate Armed Services Committee, represents the best of American military leadership. She has served with distinction in the most challenging and sensitive positions, always putting the needs of the nation ahead of personal recognition or reward. I can think of no officer more qualified to serve at the 4-star level. The confirmation was unanimous, and the promotion ceremony was held at the Pentagon with full honors and public attendance for the first time in my career. My family filled several rows in the auditorium, finally able to witness and celebrate my achievement in the same way they had celebrated Emma's promotions throughout our careers. As I took the oath of office as a 4-star general, I thought about the path that had brought me to this moment. 25 years of service in positions that required constant secrecy, achieving success that couldn't be shared, finding satisfaction in work that remained invisible to most of the world. The young woman who had once stood at attention during her commissioning ceremony, dismissed by her family as the sister who couldn't measure up to Emma's obvious potential, had become one of the most senior military officers in the United States. But more importantly, I had learned that success isn't about external recognition or family approval. It's about finding work that challenges you, serves something larger than yourself, and allows you to make a difference in the world, even if that difference remains invisible to most people. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs and celebrations, my grandfather approached me with obvious emotion. At 97, he moved slowly but still carried himself with military bearing. "Sarah," he said, "I've lived long enough to see something I never thought possible, a woman from our family achieving 4-star rank in the United States military. More than that, I've lived long enough to understand that there are many ways to serve with honor, and that the most important service often happens where no one can see it." He saluted me with a precision that hadn't diminished despite his age. "General Mitchell," he said formally, "it has been an honor to serve in the same family as you." That evening, at the celebration dinner, Emma stood to offer a toast that captured everything our relationship had become. "To my sister Sarah," she said, "who taught me that strength comes in many forms, that leadership doesn't always require visibility, and that the most important victories are often the ones no one knows about. You've shown our family and our country what it means to serve with quiet dignity and unwavering commitment." She paused, looking around the room at our family members. "For too many years, we measured success by the wrong standards. We celebrated the achievements we could see and dismissed the ones we couldn't understand. Sarah spent decades serving her country at the highest levels while we thought she was struggling to keep up with my career." Her voice grew stronger. "Today, we celebrate not just her promotion to 4-star rank, but our family's learning to recognize different kinds of excellence, different forms of heroism, and different ways of making a difference in the world." As I looked around the table at my family, people who had spent decades not understanding my career but who now appreciated its significance, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with rank or recognition. The validation I had once sought from them was no longer necessary for my sense of worth or accomplishment. But having their understanding and respect felt like a gift that made all the years of invisible service worth celebrating. My current position requires responsibilities I still can't discuss, in locations I still can't name, working with partners whose identities remain classified. But for the first time in my career, my service is taking place with the full understanding and support of my family. They may not know the specifics of what I do, but they understand its importance. They may not be able to attend classified ceremonies or see the full scope of my achievements, but they appreciate the sacrifice and commitment that my career has required. Most importantly, they've learned that heroism comes in many forms, that service can require different kinds of courage, and that some of the most important work happens in shadows that most people never see. The young girl who will grow up hearing stories about her aunt, the 4-star general, will understand from the beginning that there are many paths to significance, many ways to serve with honor, and many forms that success can take. She'll know that recognition isn't the measure of achievement, that visibility isn't the measure of importance, and that the opinions of others, even family, aren't the measure of worth. She'll know that sometimes the biggest failures become the greatest leaders, and that the people closest to us are often the last to see who we really are. If my story resonates with you today, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or underestimated by the people whose opinions matter most to you, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by their recognition. The work you do, the service you provide, the difference you make, these have value regardless of who acknowledges them. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with family dynamics and being underestimated. Have you ever had to choose between authenticity and approval? How did you find the strength to keep going when others didn't understand your path? And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this story with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your own definition of success, about the courage it takes to serve without recognition, and about the heroes who work in the shadows to keep our world safe. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the people closest to us are the last to see who we really are. But that doesn't make our achievements any less real or our service any less valuable.